Hello. Before we go to the main facilitation, I want you to look at these pictures. We are talking about the concepts of agrarian institution and their management. So if you are looking at these pictures, you will see that it talks about agrarian institution. You can see this is ancient Egyptian. This is their way of farming. Before they use animal as their source of power. And also, before they start domesticating, they were moving from one place to the other in search of food. And also the hunters, they were hunting animals in the bush. But as time goes on now, they now discover that the fruits they eat and throw away, the seeds of plants they eat and throw away germinate. So they now decide that if they take these plants, or they will now plant them in a particular place, and nurture it, it will grow into another plant, a matured plant where they will, and fruits, so where they will make use of it. So they also discover that if the animals they also gathered from the bush, if they will be able to bring these animals alive and domesticate them, it will pay them better rather than moving from one place to the other. That is the genesis of agrarian institution. And here now you see that they have now started a cultivation of crops in a particular place. You see what they are doing, they are planting, and it was animal that they were used as their source of power. You can see this person is harvesting vegetables. Now he is putting it here so that the animal will pull it and then take it to wherever, or home, take it home or to the market for distribution. And as time goes on, they are developed now. Agrarian institutions still continue to develop and then civilize. You can see now they have now turned to using, you can see what these people are doing here. They are making drainage. This drainage will also serve as a source of irrigation for them. You can see that this plant here, it is a rice that they are cultivating here. So this drainage now will use as a point of where water can just come in and then into their plants. And also, they will also use it as a drainage system. If the water is too much, they will now open where the blocks, and then the water will go out. In case of flood or heavy rainfall, it will not affect their crops. So you can see that they started from gathering of fruits from one place to the other, to settlements, and then they will now increase to, if there is another picture that I will have shown where they used to mechanize implements, advanced implements like tractors to plow their land, harvesters to harvest their plants, and planter to plant their crops. So in our next lesson, we will bring in that picture. The course objectives of this. So at the end of this lesson, the student should be able to define agriculture, define agrarian institution, list the basic components that are inevitable in the nations, relates agricultural development with rural development, explain institution, trace the historical perspective of perspective of agrarian history to South Asia, highlight the major events in the agrarian history, examine the historical process of rural development in Nigeria, describe the conduct performance of rural development effort, and explain the rural development enterprises of the farm activities. We will look at agriculture first. Agriculture can be defined as the act of cultivating crops and rearing animals, including the keeping of other livestock for the use of man. It also includes the processing, marketing, consumption of these products. As far as agriculture, a farmer is concerned, production, when you are embarking on production cannot end until it will reach the hand of the final consumers. You cannot produce and leave it in the farm. So it has to do with processing, marketing, that is distribution, and then the consumers, the last person will pick it as a consumer. And then the concepts of agrarian, we are looking at the concepts of agrarian. It is the concept relating to or concerning the land and its uses, ownership, cultivation, and tenure. It further relates to agricultural and rural matters. It is also intended to further agricultural interests. That is the concepts. It relates to the land and its uses. The ownership, that's when we talk about the ownership, we are talking about the land tenure system, cultivation, and others. Then we also will relate to rural matters. The rural environment, agriculture normally takes place in rural areas. It is only in very few occasions we have it in an urban area. It is just a little portion of land, but in rural areas where there is a large area of land, that is where agriculture really takes place, and most of the people in the rural areas are farmers. Let us look at the institution also. Institution, on the other hand, is defined as a collective action in restraint, liberation, and expansion of individual action. As the rest, has to do with that the institution govern the economic, social, and political powers relationship between individual and the group of and affects directly their independence as well as achievement of reasonable order from the ever-present conflicts growing out of their relations. It is an institution that will help to manage, to tame people, that even in a situation brings about cohesion, it is an institution that will be able to determine who and how relationship, whether it is fair or unfair. It will also give stability to human relation by providing security. That is an institution. Taking, for example, maybe a society, a particular village there will be, that is their institution. They will also, in a situation like this, they will help to make sure that stability is maintained. They will also help to make sure that the people living there in that particular area, institution their interests are being protected. Complementary institutions that are necessary for agricultural development includes good land. Those are the institutions that are good for agricultural development. It's a good land tenure system, credit facilities, social organization, efficient marketing and distribution arrangement. This includes storage and warehousing. functional research institution, and extension services and supervision. So all these are the complementary institutions that will help in agricultural development. Let us look at, we cannot talk about agrarian without talking about rural areas. So what is rural in the first place? Rural is any population, housing, or territory not in an urban area. So anything excluding urban area is a rural environment. So rural area or a countryside is a geographic area that is located outside towns and cities. So where there is, predominantly in the rural areas, you hardly see NEPA light, you hardly see, there is electricity, you hardly see electricity there. And then we can term such areas as rural areas. And then at that point, there are a lot of, they don't have enough social amenities in rural areas. So a typical rural areas have low population density. That is, they are sparsely populated and small settlements. They have their, in a very large area, a very large landmark area, you see people living in just a very small place. All others are bushes, and they use that area in agricultural production. So agricultural areas are commonly rural areas. That is where the actual agricultural production is taking place is in the rural areas. And as other types of areas, such as the forest, they will have forests in the rural areas. Then also different countries have different definitions of rural. This happens because of statistical and administrative purpose. Go. So also they lack social infrastructure such as communication, education, and health facility. And if water, there is good water, either pipe-borne water, or they also lack electricity in rural area. They don't have all these things compared to their urban counterparts. They also lack physical infrastructure such as transport, storage facilities, irrigational facilities are always very poor there. So institutions, cooperative society and farmers union, agricultural extension are either very weak in a rural area or ineffective. Comparatively, lower level of living in the rural area than the urban area because they don't have enough capital, and as such, their level of living will. So in the absence of development history, when we talked about agrarian history of South Asia, we are talking about of the world, the South Asia. That is where agrarian started from. This was written by David Loudon, titled An Agrarian History of South Asia. It was the 4th volume in the New Cambridge History of India. In this volume, he brought together researchers from historians, economics, anthropologists, geographers, political scientists, and rural sociology to create a comprehensive framework for an understanding of forces which have created the contemporary patchwork of agrarian regions. This extended from Afghanistan to Myanmar and Nepal to Sri Lanka. Agrarian life in this large geographic area connecting arid West Asia to Southeast Asia, as in the past, and continues today to be a hugely diverse. So you see, at this point, there were They explored, these are the territory, the territorial exploits explores the evolution of agriculture and then agrarian institution from the first evidence of farming. That's where farming started, was about from 7,500 BC through the 13th century AD. This millennium saw the expansion of social, not state power over the agro-pastoral people who spread east and south from Indian River in modern-day Pakistan. That's where today now is Pakistan. Across the Gangetic Plains to Bengal or Bangladesh, and shown the peninsula to its very tip at Kenya-Kumari. If they want peacefully and the people, they look at them as being more powerful, the next thing they want to do is to wage war against such areas, and then they conquer them and then get the land and make use of them. So from the middle of the first millennium AD, Brahmanical influences increase. That is, kings enforce their religion. At that point, duty, that is dharma, by upholding the rights of the first position to those who clear the land. Those that clear the land during that period were the owner of the land. They use patriarchal activities or authority, where men dominate, men rules at that point, and also social ranking into caste, that is class. They have class. Those in higher class will not want to relate with those in the lower class, and they form alliance and transition networks, and predominantly they were practicing conquest colonization. That's where they conquer. Each time they will go to a place and then they conquer the place, they wage war against those people to conquer the place and got used to it. Ludan, 1999, then viewed that CA 550 to 1250 was a formative period of South Asia agrarian history and agrarian region. Within this period, it was South Asia. So to the north, west, and in the high mountains, warriors lineages joined local leaders, pastoralists, and hunters by imitation, alliance, genealogy, invention, and intermarriage to form Raputs clans, whose power was based on marital might, and whose dharma do not include the acts of farming. So that is what happened in the northwest. And then in contrast, foot of the Venya mountain down the peninsula, warriors lineage joined with agricultural communities and new caste of dominance. That new class dominated such. These were warriors, cultivators. They were the one that dominates the Maya mountains. This bring about broad division were reflected in kingship practices, women's land rights. At this point now, before the women do not have right to land, but during this period, the women also have rights to land. They also form agrarian alliances that continue to the present till today. So regions focus on the late medieval early modern centuries, that is 14th to 19th centuries, in agrarian institutions, and landscapes evolved towards those that were recognized till this moment. So where they were able to conquer, and that is what belongs to. As they increase, as the world trade increase across Europe is by land and sea, because during that period they move from straight to a long distance, and so some of them move by sea, and then become more closely integrated for 14th century onwards. Then during this period, new technologies, ideas, habits, language, people and needs came into farming community. As the civilization goes on, they continue trading with the other countries now, European countries. Then you can see that the new technology came up in 14th century. They were able to embrace new technologies, new ideas. Also, habits, languages different apart from their own language. Then they come into forming farming communities. So at this period, agriculture became so intensified. So across the continents. During this period, there was improvement in transportation network. Then urbanization also set in, spread up. Then new and more intrusive accounts of people, production and trade evolved. So many people, different people started marketing, coming to where South Asian buy things and then take it to their own Europe and then sell them. And then also at this point too, there was agrarian taxation was also systematic, and its borders increase. This brings about increase. When there is tax, and then as a result of that, there will be increase in the price of that thing, and also the tax. Also, they will generate through tax. They will be able to develop their country. So entitlement to land use and power shifted from social to financial obligation. At this point in time, the land. Having looked at this, let us look at rural development management. We are going to consider the historical process of rural development. So we'll take that of Nigeria, the historical process of rural development. So in 1946 to 55, Nigerian experience during this period was experienced in development was the genesis of development effort. It's 1945 to 55 was the genesis of the development effort in Nigeria. This period witnessed a situation in which colonial administrators of the country prepared a plan based on a combination of projects in contradiction to the need for single value objectives oriented plan. You see, when the colonial masters came in, their aim was to develop their own country. They will now make us, the Nigerians, that should plant this, because they were in fact concentrate on plantation of export crops such as cocoa, and then what are they doing? They will now get these crops, take it to their country, and then they produce it into finished goods, process it into finished goods, and then that is what really continues at this point in time. Then the second phase was a period between 1955 and to 60, when the country metamorphosed from colonial rules through regional self-government to national political independence. At least during this period, 1st October 1960, in Nigeria obtained independence. That means they were no longer under colonial masters. So during this period, the regional development plans were based on multiple projects rather than an integrated development plan that were prepared and executed. So during this period, the plan action lingered. The plan action here during this period lingered on for a period between 1960 to 1961 in view of the absence of the plan document. So the period 1962 to 1968 constitutes the third phase of national development effort. This period coincides with United Nations first development decades, that is between 1960 to 1969, which may be named which was named Community Development Decades. During this period, the concentration was on development of the community. So the plan document was an amalgamation of regional plans without any effort to integrate single value objectives and with peripheral references to rural development. The plan lingered till 1970 in view of the interruption in 1960, that is in view of the interruption in 1967 and the prosecution of till 1970. The Civil War, that is during this period, was the period of Civil War, that is the interruption. During this period was the Civil War in Nigeria between 1967 to 1970. So the fourth period came between 70 and 1974, in which the plan document was an integrated single value objectives approach, emphasizing different growth rates objectives and developmental philosophies. Center was still on development, different developmental philosophies. The fifth phase, was between 1975 and 80s. The plan documents continued during the military administration, that it was their single value objectives that was originated approach with multiple growth rates and specific developmental philosophy. These two plan periods, that is the period between 1970 to 1971 and 1975 to 1980, coincide with what we call the United Nations second development decade, which may be termed integrated rural development decade. We say that the first development decade was between 1960 to 1969, and this decade was called United Nations First Development Decade. So we have now come to see the United Nations Second Development Decade, which took place in 1970 to 1979. Here, in these two development periods, rural development was seen as a distinct planning items and the concept of integrated rural urban development program was regarded as an exception rather than the rule. So during this period, they were itemized rural development program during this period, the period 1962 to 1975 as a whole may be said to have followed a combination of 4 operations. And this period has a program. Program was into a combination of 4 patterns as follows. The first program was that the sectorial strategy, which is addressed to economic sectors such as regional country planning, agriculture, in which specific projects were the focus of attention. Another pattern was the coordinated strategy, which seems to integrate rural development effort in a combination of sectors such as agriculture, agro-industry, and rural infrastructure in a given or a specific rural community. You see, this one, the coordinated strategy, this one, the aim was to integrate rural development with a combination of agriculture and agro-industry. By the time the farmers will produce, the industry will now get it from them, the agro-industry will get it from them, and then process it into finished goods. And also during this period, there were rural infrastructure such as roads, other social amenities were put in place. The next stage, that is the third stage, was our strategies or program or projects, was a participatory strategy, which is a community development approach whereby residents were involved in planning. These points, residents were involved in planning. They make decisions that is based on socioeconomic goals and plan execution with governmental or state support. So at this point, they now come to the resident level, the rural area, rural people level. So, okay, you will be the one to do the planning and then get back to us, and then so that the government now will now execute whatever they want or support the state in order to execute the program or project. The next stage was the multi-purpose strategy, which attempts to promote national security through multiple programs of reconstruction, rehabilitation designed to stimulate growth and foster universal popular support for the government, as they attempt to promote the national security. That means they bring into security agents and others, and then reconstruct the and rehabilitation design to settle growth and foster. All this brings about to foster relationship and universal popular support for the government. So at this point, what they make sure that there is security, there is security in the nation, and then there will be nothing like riots or whatever. And the aim was to support the government, to foster growth by supporting the government. So the concept of rural development as planning objectives was never fully appreciated. So with this, it was not fully, the concept was not fully appreciated. Pursued, neither was the need for significant concerted effort in rural areas. So all really took place or appreciated or coordinated. So the conduct of rural development effort and the program have evolved over the last 50 years in series of strategies, which may be complementary, supportive, antagonistic, competitive, and sometimes conflicting. That is all about the concepts. Either to support, or there was problem and people started becoming irritated, or to bring about competition. So the first strategy employed in the early 50s is that of the government projects, mainly agriculture, in various local government councils areas. The second strategy saw as the first strategy was the sectorial strategy. As the sectorial strategy employed in that cycle was the government project mainly to agricultural in various council areas as to support agricultural production. So the second strategy, that was the coordinated strategy. The coordinated strategy was to see the growth of the community projects with the full financial and management backing of the government, especially agricultural projects, which involves in community in donating land, because the project was the community would donate land while the selected enterprise or project become the entire responsibility of the government. Appropriate government ministries charge. So taking for example Ministry of Agriculture. So by 1966, when the military took over, and with onset of civil war, which lasted for 1967 to until 70, the emphasis changed. So the conduct of the rural development became a bipartisan program jointly run and financed by local communities and government. That was during that period. The community will jointly run the projects. The community established self-help scheme through target contribution of funds by each individual resident. They go from one place to the other, collect money, and we need this money to help us maybe to develop the areas in order for us to be able to either to get loan from there and also on. So on this target, the government gives a marketing grant, and programs also were executed either singly or by partition, that is in combination, in collaboration with the community and the government. So the post billions period, that is period between 1970 to 1978, is the age when petroleum products constitute more than 50% of the gross national product. You can see during this period, that was when the discovery of the oil in the nation. And then at this period, the government did not really pay more attention to agricultural industry any longer. So this happened till up to 1975. That was the period of the oil boom, was such that the government had the financial resources to implement all programs of the rural area. So at such, agriculture was neglected to the background. So the second National Development Plan between that 70 to 74 and the third National Development Plan between 75 to 80 adopted the strategy of wholly governmental conduct of the Rural Development Program. So it was no longer bipartisan. The rural development policy of the government during this period involves national commitment to raising agricultural productivity and enhancing quality of life of rural communities through provision of such amenities as health center, pipe-borne water, irrigation water, rural electrification, and then in conclusion, agricultural development can be seen as an indicator of determining the extent of the development of the country. The history has proven that agricultural development and rural development can be viewed as a process by which concerted effort are made in order to facilitate significant increase in rural resources productivity with the overall objectives of enhancing rural incomes and increasing employment opportunity in rural communities. Besides, farming and agricultural institutions have a cultural content that cannot be ignored. That is the truth about it. It cannot be ignored. In summary, we have learned about definition and basic concepts of agrarian institution, agrarian history of the world, as well as that of Nigeria and rural development management. So I want you to go home with this assignment. What do you understand by the concepts of agrarian? Then discuss briefly the historical process of rural development in Nigeria.